Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be talking about the severe weather threat across the United States over the next several days, and a storm that must be watched closely as we go into next week across the United States. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll first begin with the Central Plains, which is an area that we have so much moisture right now, and this is continuing to bring showers and storms, not really in a widespread sense of things, but there has been at least some scattered storm activity over the past 24 to 48 hours. You'll notice even this afternoon we actually have some convection boiling, some in southeast Kansas. We've also had plenty in Texas over the past 48 hours. Man, more severe weather is expected today and over the next several days for a large chunk of the Great Plains that extends from North Dakota all the way back through Texas. This will really be the area to watch for at least the next several days, all the way through Memorial Day weekend for some severe weather. Back over in the Midwest, not much going on right now. There's some thin layer clouds, but back up into Canada, we have a very strong ridge right now, and this will be dropping down to the south and even southwest over the next 48 hours. And what this will do is keep areas in the Midwest dry for the foreseeable future. And I mean like the next 7 to 10 days is how long you will have almost nothing going on there. Just going to be dry conditions with a lot of heat as well. Highs in the 80s. It's going to be very hot there over the next several days, and we will talk about more on that later in this forecast, along with that storm next week that could bring some significant severe weather. But we're first going to begin with the short-term severe weather threats in the United States. I'll briefly talk about today, since today is already winding down. We do currently have an enhanced risk of severe weather back through eastern New Mexico and western Texas. I know, kind of crazy here. We haven't had enhanced risk of severe weather in at least several days now, but the main concern in this region will be large to very large hail, and as well as the potential for a couple of tornadoes. As of right now, the Storm Prediction Center has outlined an area that has at least a chance for hail upwards of 3 to 4 inches in diameter, and that's primarily right there along the Texas and New Mexico border, back through the hill country. This will remain west of Lubbock, but there will be a chance for isolated severe weather closer to Lubbock and Amarillo later this evening. Also, the tornado risk overall is low. It's not zero. There will probably at least be a couple of tornadoes along the border of Texas and New Mexico today. So taking you hour by hour, going closer to 6 to 7 o'clock tonight, storms will fire up across areas in New Mexico. Moving into Texas, sometime around sunset or so is when those storms will really start to intensify closer to Texas. Once we go closer to 9 to 10 o'clock, storms will be rolling through areas near Lubbock and Amarillo, and eventually going into the overnight hours, this will be a cluster of storms with an outflow boundary, which does mean these storms will continue to at least produce some sort of level of gusty winds up to 40 to 50 miles per hour as these continue to march south and east across areas in Texas and even into western Oklahoma. But overall, severe weather is not expected there. By the morning hours, this is at sunrise, there actually might still be some storm activity out there, but overall, severe weather is not really expected then. Now, for tomorrow, this is tossing trampolines on trees Thursday. There is going to be a chance of that back over in western Texas and back through Colorado. This is mainly for the threat of some damaging winds. For the most part, it's an isolated threat, and as well as maybe a little bit of large hail. Again, no big concerns there. And then going into Friday, for Flying Fences Friday, we do have a really large marginal threat of severe weather. This is one of the longest areas I've ever seen for a marginal risk of severe weather, but this does go from Montana all the way back through Texas. It pretty much goes across 3 countries. It's kind of crazy. But this is mainly for the threat of damaging winds and maybe some sporadic hail, maybe a brief tornado somewhere in there, but overall the threat of that still remains low at this time. Now let's prepare you for next week. Next week will be pretty interesting because obviously we are in late May. We've had a pretty quiet last couple of weeks in terms of severe weather, but there is going to be a chance for that to ramp up a bit more as we get closer to the tail end of the month and as well as into early June, right before summer hits, because we're only 4 weeks away from summer as of today. So we are getting pretty close to that, but we will have a chance for some severe weather. So let's take you through the next few days and as well as going into early next week, beginning with today and tomorrow. This is the current weather pattern that we're in across the United States. We have a ridge in the central United States, and we also have 2 low pressure systems, one of which is back over in the northwest side of the United States and another one back over closer to New England. And this is essentially an omega block pattern. That means that we have a high pressure ridge in the central United States that's pretty much keeping the really large chunk of the country for the most part dry, but overall we're not really seeing any significant severe weather because there's just not a whole lot of organization because this ridge is just playing such a huge factor into the weather right now. But once we go into this weekend, it starts to shift a bit to the east. You'll actually notice there's going to be a little low pressure system in the upper levels back down into the southeast United States. That is actually from a tropical system system that could develop just off the coast of Florida over the next few days. I'll talk about more on that in a moment. But notice back over into the western half of the United States, there is a chance that we have a low pressure system develop early next week. And if this is able to eject across the United States, we very well could see the potential for some more significant severe weather. This is going into Tuesday into Wednesday of next week. This is where that low pressure system is. And if it is able to eject, we could see some significant severe weather sometime around mid next week. I think early next week will be okay. But once we get closer to maybe Wednesday or Thursday, if things line up correctly, we very well could see this pose a threat to the United States and maybe bring some significant severe weather. That would probably be across the Great Plains, not really the Midwest. Because obviously, if you're in the Midwest, it's been dry recently. And we're going to take you through that right now. The dew points across the United States, air is a huge contrast. Look over the Midwest. This is where our high pressure system at the surface is. And then back over in the Great Plains, there is a huge plume of strong southerly winds, one, and then two, we just have tons of moisture. I mean, it's unbelievable. This is all coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, and this pattern will continue over the next several days. We are going to see the threat for some severe weather to continue in this area because of how much humidity we have, and if there's any initiators like a dry line or even a weak cold front, we very well could see an increase of severe weather. And once we go into the weekend and early next week, that moisture really does not move much. We're still seeing a huge surplus of moisture across the Great Plains. That'll continue from strong southerly winds. Meanwhile, over in the Midwest, that area of dry air actually becomes larger. It'll be covering a really large area, anywhere from basically almost the East Coast back through the Midwest and even into parts of the central and northern plains, primarily the eastern half there of those areas. But once we go into next week around Memorial Day, humidity starts to uptick a bit. That high pressure system will start to weaken, and then we'll start to see dew points climb into the 60s, and that's already kind of ongoing right now, but they'll actually get closer to 70s. So we'll be watching for that potential, which could again increase the chance for some showers and storms. Now, whether any of this is organized is a huge question mark. Right now, the European model is not really indicating any organized severe weather events. Usually when we're talking about organized severe weather events, we're looking at a very sharp contrast with a dry line between moist air and dry air, and we're not seeing any of that right now. I mean, even where the line is I just drew, there's no sharp contrast. It's obviously moist air all around it. There's just a small decrease in the dew points from east to west. So overall, again, we don't have really any organized patterns right now. And will we actually see any to end off May? It seems unlikely, but there might be a chance sometime in the first few days there of June for some sort of significant severe weather event across the Great Plains. But again, we are actually getting pretty far away from the main peak of severe weather season. The peak of severe weather season has been getting earlier and earlier every year. I mean, we're talking about March and April typically now, with some severe weather still in May. Now, for the next few days, in terms of the future radar, we'll have showers and storms across the Great Plains with all that moisture. High pressure system, as I mentioned before, back over in the Midwest. But look down here near Florida. There's actually a 10% chance in the next few days of a tropical system developing, either a tropical depression or a tropical storm. Seems low at this time, but there might be something that develops down there. This will mainly just produce rain. Overall, nothing really else will come out of that. Once we go to Monday and Tuesday of next week, most of the United States is dry with some sporadic storms. Again, if something can eject back over here in the southwest United States as in terms of like a trough, we very well could see the threat for some severe weather, and eventually going to next weekend, too far out to really predict anything there, but there might at least be some sort of dry weather there as well. And to end off this forecast, I'll give you some excitement for some of you, and then obviously not a whole lot of excitement for others. Now, right now, for the next 7 days, depends on who you are. If you want rain, you'll have to be in the Great Plains. There will be a good chance of at least somewhere between 1 to 3 inches of rain in a pretty large area over the next 7 days. This goes all the way through Wednesday of next week from the Weather Prediction Center's forecast. And then back over in the Midwest, just dry weather. Really no rain's expected there as that high pressure system continues to dominate across that region. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.